thought the night was over, but I have a secret that changes everything.
A secret? About what?
Victoria Hayes stood in the center of the Riverside Art Gallery, adjusting the spotlight on a vibrant, abstract painting for the third time that evening. Her fingers trembled slightly, not from nerves about the charity gala, but from exhaustion. For 6 months, she had poured every ounce of her energy into this event, determined to showcase talented local artists who deserved recognition, but lacked the connections to get it. The gallery smelled of fresh paint, expensive perfume, and the catered hors d'oeuvres that were probably costing more than her monthly rent. Women in elegant gowns and men in perfectly tailored suits filled the space, their champagne glasses catching the soft amber light. Victoria smoothed down her simple black dress, the nicest thing she owned, and reminded herself that tonight was not about her. Tonight was about the art, about the artists, about making dreams come true for people who had worked their entire lives for this moment. Grace Martinez, her best friend since college, appeared at her elbow with 2 glasses of sparkling water. Grace owned a small coffee shop 3 blocks away and had closed early, just to support Victoria tonight. Her warm brown eyes crinkled with concern as she pressed a glass into Victoria's hand. "Drink something before you pass out," Grace said softly. "You look like you have not slept in days." Victoria took a grateful sip. "I have not. There was so much to do. The lighting had to be perfect. The artist's statements needed editing. And then Mr. Peterson decided at the last minute that his sculpture needed a completely different position in the gallery." Grace squeezed her shoulder. "Everything looks beautiful. You did an amazing job. Now please try to enjoy the fruits of your labor for at least 5 minutes." Victoria smiled weakly and scanned the room. The turnout was better than she had hoped. Every painting had at least 3 red dots indicating serious buyer interest. She had already overheard several conversations about commissioned work. Her heart swelled with pride for the artists she represented. These were people who had been told their work was not commercial enough, not mainstream enough, not safe enough for traditional galleries. Tonight, they were proving everyone wrong. Then she saw him. He stood near the far wall, studying a landscape painting with an intensity that made Victoria pause. Unlike most of the guests who moved quickly from piece to piece, smartphones out to capture social media content, this man seemed genuinely absorbed in the artwork. He was tall, perhaps in his early 30s, with dark hair that looked professionally styled, but slightly mussed, as if he had run his fingers through it too many times. His suit was clearly expensive, the kind of tailoring that whispered rather than shouted wealth, but it was his face that caught her attention. Strong jawline, focused dark eyes, and an expression of such deep concentration that Victoria found herself wondering what he was thinking. "That is Nathan Sinclair," Grace whispered, following her gaze. "I have seen him in the society pages. Owns some huge tech company. Very private, very rich, and according to my customers who read gossip magazines, very single." Victoria felt her cheeks warm. "I do not care about his relationship status. I am just glad someone is actually looking at the art instead of treating this like a social event." Grace grinned knowingly but said nothing. A conversation under starlight Victoria forced herself to circulate, thanking donors and introducing artists to potential buyers. She was in the middle of explaining the inspiration behind a bronze sculpture when she felt someone's gaze on her. She turned and found Nathan Sinclair watching her from across the room. Their eyes met for a brief moment before he looked away. Returning his attention to the painting he had been studying, something fluttered in her chest. Unexpected and unsettling. An hour later, as the crowd began to thin and Victoria finally allowed herself a moment to breathe, she stepped out onto the gallery's small balcony. The night air was cool against her flushed skin. Below, the city lights reflected off the river, creating a shimmering pathway that seemed to lead nowhere, everywhere at once. "The view is better than any painting in there." Victoria jumped, turning to find Nathan Sinclair standing in the doorway. Up close, he was even more striking. His dark eyes held a warmth that his serious expression had hidden, and when he smiled, small lines appeared at the corners of his eyes. "I did not mean to startle you," he said, stepping onto the balcony but maintaining a respectful distance. I saw you slip out and thought you might want some company. Or if you prefer solitude, I can leave." "No, it is fine," Victoria heard herself say. "The company is nice. These events can be overwhelming." "You organized all of this?" Nathan gestured back toward the gallery. Victoria nodded. "I am the curator here. Tonight was 6 months in the planning. I wanted to create a platform for artists who do not usually get gallery representation." Nathan leaned against the railing, his expression thoughtful. "The Anderson landscape in there. The one with the storm clouds over the wheat field. The artist captures something most people miss. The beauty in chaos, the life in destruction. It is remarkable." Victoria's breath caught. That was exactly what she had written in the artist's statement, the heart of what made that painting special. Most guests had walked past it, preferring the brighter, more cheerful pieces. "You really see it," she said softly. "Most people tonight just want something pretty to hang over their couch." Nathan turned to face her fully. "Art should make you feel something, even if that feeling is uncomfortable. Especially if it is uncomfortable. That is how we grow." They talked for over an hour. Standing on that balcony as the last guests filtered out and Grace handled the closing details inside, Nathan asked thoughtful questions about each artist, about Victoria's vision for the gallery, about her own dreams. He listened in a way that made her feel truly heard. Not just waiting for his turn to speak, Victoria found herself sharing things she rarely discussed. Her childhood in a small town where art was considered impractical. Her mother, who had wanted her to become a doctor or a lawyer, something stable and respectable. Her decision to move to the city with nothing but a degree in art history and a stubborn belief that beauty mattered. "My family thinks I am wasting my potential," she admitted, surprising herself with the confession. "They do not understand why I work 60-hour weeks for a salary that barely covers rent when I could be doing something more practical." Nathan was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I built my first company because I wanted to prove I could. I built my second company because everyone expected me to. I am building my third company because I finally figured out that success means nothing. If you are not passionate about the work, your family will understand eventually. And if they do not, well, you will still have lived a life that matters to you." Victoria smiled, feeling tears prick her eyes. She blinked them away quickly. "Thank you. I needed to hear that tonight." The magic hour Grace poked her head out onto the balcony, her expression apologetic. "Victoria, I hate to interrupt, but we need to lock up. The caterers are waiting to pack up." Victoria nodded, reality crashing back. "Of course, I am sorry I lost track of time." Nathan straightened. "I should let you finish your work. But Victoria, I would very much like to see you again. Would you consider having dinner with me tomorrow night?" Her heart raced. "I would like that." They exchanged phone numbers, and as Nathan left, he paused at the gallery entrance and looked back at her. "Tonight was special. Thank you for creating something beautiful." After he was gone, Grace practically pounced. "Please tell me you were going to dinner with him. Please tell me you gave him your real number and not some fake rejection hotline." Victoria laughed, the sound bubbling up from somewhere deep and genuine. "I gave him my real number. And yes, I am having dinner with him tomorrow. I cannot believe I am having dinner with him tomorrow." Grace hugged her tight. "You deserve this. You deserve someone who sees how amazing you are." Walking home that night, through streets still damp from an earlier rain, Victoria felt something she had not experienced in years. Hope. Pure. Uncomplicated hope that maybe, just maybe, life was about to become extraordinary. She did not know then that in less than 12 hours, Nathan Sinclair would disappear from her life as suddenly as he had entered it. She did not know that 3 months of silence would follow, 3 months of unanswered texts and unreturned calls. She did not know that the hope blooming in her chest would wither into confusion, then hurt, then anger to all she knew in that moment was that the night felt full of possibility. And for the first time and longer than she could remember, Victoria Hayes was excited about tomorrow. Victoria Hayes sat in her small apartment, staring at her phone for the 100th time that week. The screen remained dark, empty of the message she kept hoping would appear. 3 months had passed since the charity gala. 3 months since Nathan Sinclair had walked out of her life without explanation. The dinner they were supposed to have the next evening never happened. He simply vanished. She had texted him the morning after the gala, a simple message confirming their plans. No response. She waited 2 days before trying again, keeping her tone light and casual. Nothing. After a week, she called. The phone rang and rang before going to voicemail. She left one message, then a second a few days later. Both went unanswered. Grace had been furious on her behalf. "He is a coward," she had declared over coffee, her hands gripping her mug so tightly her knuckles turned white. "He gives you this beautiful evening, makes you feel special, and then ghosts you like some college kid who cannot handle adult conversations. You deserve so much better." Victoria knew Grace was right. She did deserve better. But knowing something intellectually and accepting it emotionally were two entirely different things. Late at night, when sleep refused to come, Victoria replayed their conversation on the balcony, searching for clues she might have missed. Had she said something wrong? Had she misread his interest? The uncertainty gnawed at her, worse than simple rejection would have been. The gallery became her refuge. She threw herself into her work with renewed intensity, organizing exhibitions, scouting new talent, staying late every night until exhaustion forced her home. Her artists noticed but said nothing, recognizing the signs of a heart trying to heal through productivity. An ordinary Thursday afternoon arrived, gray and drizzly. The kind of weather that made people walk faster and speak less. Victoria was in the gallery's back office, reviewing applications for their summer showcase program. She had a cup of tea growing cold at her elbow and classical music playing softly through the speakers. The gallery was quiet, with only 2 visitors browsing the current exhibition. The bell above the front door chimed, indicating someone new had entered. Victoria did not look up, assuming her assistant would handle whoever it was. She was deep into reading an artist's statement about identity and displacement when she heard footsteps approaching her office. "Excuse me, Victoria." She knew that voice. Her entire body went rigid, her heart suddenly hammering against her ribs. Slowly, she looked up from her desk. Nathan Sinclair stood in her doorway, looking thinner than she remembered. His suit was still expensive, still perfectly tailored, but there were shadows under his eyes that had not been there before. He held a bouquet of white lilies, her favorite flower, though she had never told him that. His expression was a mixture of hope and fear that might have moved her if she were not so angry. Victoria set down her pen with deliberate care. Her voice came out colder than winter rain. "You have a lot of nerve showing up here." "I know," Nathan said quietly. "I know I do. And I know I have no right to ask for your time after what I did. But Victoria, please, let me explain. I owe you that much." "You owe me nothing," she replied, standing up. Her hands were shaking, so she pressed them flat against her desk. "You made your choice 3 months ago when you decided I was not worth a simple text message. When you decided my feelings did not matter enough for even a basic explanation, you are right. You are absolutely right." Nathan took a tentative step into the office. "But I am here now, and I am asking, begging, actually, for 15 minutes. Just 15 minutes to tell you what happened. If you still want me to leave after that, I will go and never bother you again." Victoria wanted to say no. Every rational part of her brain screamed that she should protect herself, maintain her dignity, send him away. But there was a smaller, quieter part of her that still remembered the connection they had shared on that balcony. The part that needed to understand what had gone so catastrophically wrong. "Fine," she said finally. 15 minutes, but not here. There is a bench in the park across the street. Meet me there in 5 minutes. I need to tell my assistant where I am going." Nathan nodded, relief flooding his features. "Thank you. Thank you, Victoria." The truth unveiled. The park was nearly empty, just a few joggers and a woman walking her dog. Victoria sat on a bench beneath an old oak tree, her arms crossed protectively over her chest. Nathan sat beside her, but maintained distance, the lilies resting between them like a peace offering. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Victoria could hear birds singing somewhere overhead, indifferent to the human drama unfolding below. "My father died the morning we were supposed to have dinner," Nathan began, his voice rough with emotion. "He had a massive heart attack while swimming laps in his pool. By the time the housekeeper found him, he was already gone." Victoria felt her anger waver, replaced by a flicker of sympathy. "Nathan, I am so sorry, but that does not explain 3 months of silence." He turned to look at her, and she saw tears gathering in his eyes. "My father and I had a complicated relationship. He was brilliant, demanding, impossible to please. When I was 22, I fell in love with someone he did not approve of. A woman named Jennifer who came from a working-class background. She was studying social work, wanted to help people, had this incredible light about her." Nathan paused, gathering himself. "My father gave me an ultimatum. End the relationship, or be cut off from the family business, the family fortune, everything. I was young and stupid and convinced that love could conquer anything. So I chose Jennifer. We got engaged. We started planning a life together. What happened?" Victoria asked softly. "My father happened. He could not control me directly anymore, so he went after her. He used his connections to get her expelled from her graduate program on fabricated plagiarism charges. He had her evicted from her apartment. He made it impossible for her to find work in this city." Nathan's hands clenched into fists. "Jennifer broke off our engagement. She said she loved me, but could not be the reason I lost my family, or the reason her own life was being destroyed. She moved across the country. I've not heard from her in 8 years." Victoria sat very still, processing this information. "That is horrible. Truly horrible. But Nathan, what does this have to do with us?" He met her eyes, his expression raw and vulnerable. "When my father died, I inherited everything. The company, the fortune, all of it. And along with the estate, I inherited his files. Victoria, he had been investigating you. From the moment I mentioned wanting to see you again, he had hired people to dig into your background, looking for anything he could use to destroy you the way he destroyed Jennifer." Victoria felt cold all over. "He what?" Nathan pulled out his phone, showing her a folder of documents. "Look, he found out about your student loans, your mother's medical bills from 2 years ago, the fact that your gallery operates on a razor-thin budget. He had plans, Victoria. Plans to call in your loans early through banks he had connections with. Plans to spread rumors about the gallery being financially unstable. He was going to systematically dismantle your life if I continued seeing you." Tears streamed down Nathan's face now. Checked. "When he died that morning, I realized I could protect you by staying away. If I never contacted you again, his associates would have no reason to execute his plans. So I vanished. I blocked your number so I would not be tempted to respond. I threw myself into settling the estate and restructuring the company. And every single day, I thought about you. Every single day. I wanted to reach out, but convinced myself I was protecting you." Victoria was crying too now, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what he was telling her. "So why come back? Why now?" "Because I spent 3 months trying to do the right thing, and I finally realized I was repeating my father's mistakes. He spent his whole life trying to control everything and everyone around him, and he died alone and bitter." Nathan reached for her hand tentatively, and when she did not pull away, he held it gently. "I was letting fear and trauma dictate my choices, instead of fighting for what mattered. You matter, Victoria. What we had, what we could have, matters more than fear." The choice. Victoria looked down at their joined hands, her mind racing. Part of her was still angry, still hurt by the months of silence and confusion. But a larger part of her understood. She thought about her own mother, about the control her family had tried to exert over her choices. She thought about how fear could paralyze people into making terrible decisions while thinking they were being noble. "Your father is gone now," she said slowly. "Those plans can never be executed." Nathan nodded. "I spent the last month making absolutely certain. I bought out the banks that held your loans and transferred them to institutions with fair terms. I set up anonymous grants for galleries like yours. I did everything I could think of to ensure that no one could ever use my wealth as a weapon against you or anyone else I care about. 6 weeks passed like pages turning in a book Victoria could not put down. Nathan kept his promise, showing up to every gallery event, always respectful, always keeping appropriate distance. He came to the opening of a photography exhibition featuring urban landscapes, spending an hour discussing composition and light with the artist. He attended a poetry reading in the gallery's small theater space, sitting in the back row, but listening intently to every word. He volunteered to help hang paintings for a group show. Working alongside Victoria in comfortable silence, broken only by occasional questions about placement and lighting, Grace watched this slow courtship with a mixture of approval and impatience. "He is trying so hard," she said one afternoon as they prepared coffee in the gallery's tiny break room. "But Victoria, at some point, you need to decide if you are going to let him back in or let him go. This limbo is not fair to either of you." Victoria stirred sugar into her cup, watching the liquid swirl. "I know, I am just scared, Grace. What if I open my heart again and he runs when things get difficult? What if his therapy is not enough? What if I am setting myself up for worse pain than before?" Grace touched her arm gently. "What if he becomes the love of your life and you miss it because you were too afraid to try? Fear is a terrible reason to say no to happiness." That evening, Nathan arrived for a sculpture unveiling wearing jeans and a casual sweater instead of his usual suit. He looked younger this way, more relaxed. When he smiled at Victoria across the crowded gallery, she felt her resolve weakening. After the event ended and the last guests filtered out, Nathan helped her arrange chairs and collect empty wine glasses. They worked in synchronized silence, a rhythm they had developed over the past weeks. Finally, as Victoria locked the front door, Nathan spoke. "I got accepted into a volunteer program, teaching business skills to entrepreneurs from underserved communities. It starts next month, twice a week in the evenings." Victoria turned to face him. "That sounds wonderful. What made you decide to do that?" He smiled, but there was vulnerability in his eyes. "My therapist suggested I find ways to use my resources for good, to create a legacy different from my father's. Plus, I remembered what you said that night on the balcony, about art mattering, about creating platforms for people who deserve recognition but lack connections. I want to do that too, just in a different field." Victoria felt warmth spreading through her chest. "I am proud of you. That takes courage." Nathan took a careful step closer. "Victoria, I know we are taking things slow. I know I am earning back your trust. But I need you to know that every day I spend with you, even just as friends, reminds me why I came back. You make me want to be better, do better, live better." Before she could overthink it, before fear could stop her, Victoria closed the distance between them and kissed him. It was soft and tentative at first, a question more than a statement. But when Nathan's arms came around her, when he kissed her back with a gentleness that made her heart ache, Victoria knew she was making the right choice. When they finally pulled apart, both slightly breathless, Nathan rested his forehead against hers. "Does this mean what I hope it means?" "It means I am willing to try," Victoria whispered. "Really try. No more friend zone, no more keeping walls up. But Nathan, if things get difficult, you have to promise me you will talk to me instead of disappearing. Communication, honesty, even when it is hard. I promise. I swear to you, Victoria, I will never run away again." The storm approaches for 3 beautiful months. Victoria felt like she was living in a dream. Nathan took her to quiet restaurants where they talked for hours. They spent Sunday mornings at farmers markets, buying fresh flowers for her apartment and ingredients for meals they cooked together. He met Grace properly, enduring her protective scrutiny with good humor until she finally declared him acceptable. Victoria met Robert Chin, Nathan's business partner, a sharp-minded man who clearly cared about Nathan's well-being. Nathan was patient with Victoria's occasional moments of fear. The times when his phone would ring and she would tense, worried he was about to disappear again. He never got frustrated, never made her feel foolish. Instead, he would take her hand and calmly explain where he was going, when he would be back. Always following through on his promises. Victoria introduced Nathan to her younger sister Olivia during a video call. Olivia, who was finishing medical school in another state, grilled Nathan with questions for 20 minutes before finally smiling and saying he will do. But if you hurt my sister again, I know how to make deaths look like accidents. Nathan had laughed, promised to treat Victoria like the treasure she was, and won Olivia over completely by asking thoughtful questions about her research. Everything felt perfect. Too perfect. And Victoria, who had learned early in life that nothing good lasted forever, kept waiting for the other shoe to drop. It dropped on a Tuesday. Evening in the form of a woman named Nathan Sinclair, Victoria was at Nathan's apartment. A stunning penthouse overlooking the river, helping him sort through some of his father's remaining belongings that had been in storage. They were laughing over a photograph of teenage Nathan with terrible hair when the doorbell rang. Nathan frowned. I am not expecting anyone. He went to answer it, and Victoria heard a woman's voice, sharp and imperious. Nathan, darling, we need to talk. Now. A tall woman in her 50s swept into the apartment, her designer suit immaculate, her blonde hair perfectly coiffed. She had Nathan's dark eyes, but none of his warmth. Her gaze landed on Victoria, and her expression hardened. So this is her. The gallery girl your father was so worried about. Victoria felt ice forming in her veins. Nathan stepped between them, his voice firm. Aunt Catherine, you need to leave. Catherine laughed, a brittle sound. Leave? I do not think so. I came to deliver some news that concerns both of you. You see, Victoria, while Nathan was busy playing house with you, he neglected some rather important business matters. She pulled out a folder from her expensive handbag and dropped it on the coffee table. Inside were legal documents, financial statements, and photographs. Victoria caught glimpses of her gallery, her artists. Her entire professional life laid out like evidence in a trial. Nathan's face went pale. What did you do? Catherine smiled coldly. I finished what my brother started. You thought buying off a few banks would protect her? How naive. I have been systematically contacting every major donor who supports her little gallery, sharing concerns about financial instability, questioning the quality of the artists she represents, suggesting that perhaps their charitable dollars would be better spent elsewhere. Victoria felt the room spinning. You what? Nathan grabbed the documents, his hands shaking as he read through them. 3 of their biggest donors have pulled funding in the last 2 weeks. 2 corporate sponsors have declined to renew their contracts. The gallery's summer showcase, the one Victoria had been planning for months, suddenly had no budget. Why would you do this? Nathan's voice cracked. She has nothing to do with family business. Catherine's expression turned venomous. Because you were weak, just like you were with that Jennifer girl. Our family built an empire through strength and strategic ruthlessness, and you are throwing it away for feelings. Your father understood that personal relationships are liabilities. I am simply teaching you the same lesson. Get out, Victoria said quietly. Both Nathan and Catherine turned to look at her. Get out of this apartment right now, before I call the police. Catherine laughed again. The police? For what? I have not broken any laws. I simply exercised my right to free speech, sharing my honest concerns with people who asked for my opinion. Good luck proving otherwise. She walked toward the door, then paused. Nathan, when you are done playing house and ready to run the company properly, call me. Until then, enjoy watching everything she's built crumble. Maybe then you will understand what your father was trying to teach you. The door closed behind her with a decisive click. The hardest decision, Victoria stood frozen, trying to process what had just happened. Her gallery, her artists. Everything she had worked for was being systematically destroyed because she had fallen in love with the wrong person. Nathan moved toward her, his face stricken. Victoria, I am so sorry. I had no idea she would do this. I will fix it. I will call every donor personally. I will explain that she does not speak for me. Victoria held up a hand, stopping him. This is exactly what I was afraid of. Your family, your wealth, your world. It is toxic, Nathan. It destroys everything it touches. That is not fair. I'm not my father or my aunt. No. But you come with them as part of the package. Victoria felt tears streaming down her face. How many more relatives are going to come after me? How many more people will decide I am a threat to the Sinclair legacy and need to be eliminated? Nathan reached for her, but she stepped back. We will fight this together. I have lawyers, resources. Catherine cannot be allowed to get away with this. Victoria shook her head, her heart breaking. Nathan, do you hear yourself? You want to start a war with your own family. A war that will consume years of our lives, cost enormous amounts of money, and hurt innocent people caught in the crossfire. My artists do not deserve that. They came to my gallery because they trusted me to protect them, not make them casualties in some billionaire family drama. So what are you saying? Nathan's voice was barely a whisper. I am saying maybe your aunt is right. Maybe we are bad for each other. Not because we do not love each other, but because the circumstances make it impossible. Victoria, please, do not do this. Do not let her win. She looked at him, memorizing every detail of his face. I love you. I genuinely love you. But loving someone is not always enough. Sometimes the obstacles are too big, the costs too high. Nathan was crying now, not bothering to hide it. I will give it all up. The company, the money, everything. We can start over somewhere else, somewhere they cannot touch us. And then what? Victoria asked gently. We run away and build a life based on what you gave up. Eventually, you would resent me. You would wake up one day and wonder what your life could have been if you had not sacrificed everything for a relationship. I would never resent you. You do not know that. Neither of us knows that. Victoria picked up her jacket and bag, her movements mechanical. I need time to think. Time to figure out how to save my gallery, protect my artists. Time to understand if there is any possible path forward for us that does not end in disaster. How much time? I do not know. Maybe days, maybe weeks, maybe forever. The choice of the heart Victoria walked out of that penthouse and spent 3 days in her apartment. Ignoring calls and texts from everyone except Grace, she contacted lawyers, reviewed contracts, made lists of alternative funding sources. The damage Catherine had done was extensive, but not necessarily fatal. With careful planning and a lot of hard work, the gallery could survive. On the 4th day, Grace showed up at her door with coffee and determination. Okay, enough hiding. Talk to me, Victoria. Let her in, and they sat on the small couch in her living room. The whole story came pouring out again. All the fear and pain and impossible choices. When she finished, Grace was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something Victoria was not expecting. Do you know why I opened my coffee shop? Victoria blinked at the change of subject. Because you love coffee and people? Grace shook her head. I opened it because I was in love with a man who lived across the country. He was finishing his PhD, had another 2 years before he could move. Everyone told me long distance was too hard, that I should just end it. But I loved him, Victoria, so I took a risk. I opened the shop in his city instead of staying where I was comfortable. I did not know that it failed. Grace smiled sadly. The shop, I mean. Terrible location. Too much competition. I lost everything I had invested. And you know what? Marcus and I broke up anyway 6 months later for completely unrelated reasons. But Victoria, I've never regretted trying. I regretted the failure, sure. But I never regretted fighting for love. Victoria felt fresh tears forming. What if fighting makes everything worse? What if not fighting means you spend the rest of your life wondering what could have been? Grace squeezed her hand. Nathan is not perfect. His family is a nightmare. The situation is messy and complicated and scary. But from what you have told me, he is willing to stand beside you and fight. The question is, are you willing to stand beside him? That evening, Victoria called Nathan. They met at the park bench, where he had first explained everything, their spot now. I have a plan, Victoria said before he could speak. We fight your aunt legally and publicly. We document everything she did, hire the best lawyers money can buy, and we make sure she faces consequences for her actions. Not for revenge, but to protect others she might target in the future. Nathan nodded slowly. Okay, what else? We establish clear boundaries with your family. You make it known that I am not a secret, not something they can attack without facing your full opposition. We stop hiding and start building a life in the open. I can do that. Nathan took her hand. What else? Victoria took a deep breath. We go to couples therapy. Not because we are broken, but because we are dealing with extraordinary circumstances, and we need tools to handle them. We learn how to communicate under pressure, how to support each other when things get hard. Yes, absolutely yes. And finally, Victoria met his eyes. We accept that this might not work. We try our absolute hardest. We fight with everything we have, but we accept that sometimes love is not enough. If we reach a point where being together causes more harm than joy, we have to be brave enough to walk away. Nathan was quiet, and Victoria thought he might refuse, but then he nodded. Okay, those are fair terms. Hard terms, but fair. Can you live with that uncertainty? He smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes. Victoria, life is uncertain. The only thing I am certain about is that I would rather fight for a chance with you than live safely without you. 2 months later, Nathan Sinclair's actions were exposed in a detailed investigative piece by a business journal. The damage to her reputation was significant, and several of her own business ventures lost credibility. She was forced to resign from the board of Nathan's company. The gallery's donors returned, bringing new supporters with them. Nathan and Victoria moved into a brownstone together, a compromise between his penthouse and her tiny apartment. They adopted a rescue dog named Jasper, who had terrible manners but an excellent heart. They went to therapy every week, worked through arguments and fears, learned to trust the process. Victoria's mother finally visited the gallery, and while she did not completely understand her daughter's choices, she hugged Victoria tight and whispered, "I am proud of you for following your heart." Nathan started a foundation supporting artists and entrepreneurs, using his resources to create the kind of legacy he could be proud of. The forever.
After a year.
Year and a half after that terrible Tuesday evening, Nathan and Victoria stood in front of their friends and family in a small ceremony at the gallery where they first met. Grace was Victoria's maid of honor, crying happy tears. Robert was Nathan's best man, grinning widely. Olivia flew in, gave a speech about how love makes people do crazy things, and welcomed Nathan to the family with only minimal threats as they exchanged vows. Victoria realized that the story she had been so afraid of had transformed into something beautiful. Not perfect, never perfect, but real and hard one, and worth every difficult moment. When Nathan kissed her, when everyone cheered, when they walked back down the aisle as husband and wife, Victoria thought about all the nights she had cried, all the times she had almost given up. She thought about the courage it took to try again after being hurt, to fight for something when the odds seemed impossible. That night, as they danced under strings of lights in the gallery, surrounded by art and love and possibility, Nathan pulled her close and whispered, "Thank you for giving me a second chance." Victoria smiled against his shoulder. "Thank you for coming back. Thank you for fighting always," he promised. "For you, always." And standing there in the place where their story began, Victoria Hayes Sinclair knew that some secrets were worth returning for, some love was worth fighting for, and some endings were really just beautiful new beginnings. The millionaire had returned with his secret, and the woman who thought the night was over discovered that sometimes the best stories are the ones that refuse to end.